Okay, and so this is a project for my senior capstone and sharing some information from people with Indigenous perspective. So it's not just a bunch of us sharing info, you know what I mean, from our point of view.
Sure.
And one thing we're wanting to do is look more into basically teaching more college students about this, because a lot of the times in the curriculum, it just ends up being like, oh, and then we push the natives out of the land and we're just going to go on to whatever else we did, you know? So it's a lot of times
Sure.
gets glazed over. So that's one thing that we're hoping to change in some classes, maybe give people extra credit opportunities and things, you know, to do on their own.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you some questions, and if there's some, and don't feel like you have to answer for everybody, you know, this is just your answers, um, not
Sure.
Indigenous people as a whole. And
Yeah, because all of our experiences are very different. I mean, I know mine is very different from a lot of other people, so I've got a very unique perspective as far as that goes.
right, exactly, and I appreciate that. And then also, if there's any questions you don't feel comfortable answering, that's fine. You can just say, let's skip this, and I'm totally
Okay,
good with that.
that works.
Okay. So my first question is, of course, you know, who are you and what tribes are you affiliated with?
Okay, so my name is Jessica Abrams, and my mother is full-blooded Sioux Indian, and her tribe is the Siston Wahpeton Oyate tribe out of Siston, South Dakota. Our reservation is the Lake Traverse Reservation. And so I've actually still got a lot of family members that live on the reservation. So I try to go back and visit like every 3 to 4 years. It's kind of hard to get out there just because it's expensive to fly. And then basically I usually end up driving out there with my kids. We usually just make like a week of it. And so got to take vacation time and all that fun stuff to do that.
Um, okay. So is what part of or what part of Dakota is like what, like if you were just state wise, like east, west, south, north, just
Yeah, it's basically the northeastern part of South Dakota, and the reservation actually extends a little bit into North Dakota as well. The
okay, cool. That
reservation is
just gives me,
huge.
you know, a little perspective of where it is in the state.
Sure. Oh,
Oh,
my thing's going off.
that's
Um,
okay.
how much time do you have left in the hour? Because I
Uh,
might only be in here for like 15, 20
yeah,
minutes.
that's fine. I mean, I have this whole hour free. I don't have to be anywhere till 4:45. So,
Okay, perfect. Can I just run in here and then I'll jump right back on when I get back out?
sounds good.
All right, I'm so sorry, but I will be right back as soon as
No,
I
you're
can.
good.
All right, thank you, dear.
Okay, cool. So, let's see. My next question was, so how do you feel about the terms Indian, Native American, and Indigenous people?
I'm not a big fan of the term Indian just because when I think of Indian, I think of someone from India.
Right.
So I personally refer to myself as Native American, but I will use Indigenous as well. So I'm fine with both of those terms.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Indian either, but you know, just always want to make sure I ask people by whatever terms they prefer. So,
Yep, makes sense.
um, so a lot of times there's government things like oil pipelines and stuff affecting tribal lands. Has any of this affected the tribe you're affiliated with, or do you know people who it has affected?
Yes. So actually, I took my youngest son with me out to Standing Rock. And we actually went out there when all the protests were going on in November of 16, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I,
That
I
sounds
think
right.
if you
Yeah.
go, I think if you go to my Facebook too, I think I've got a public album with pictures and whatnot. If you happen to want to go check it out or whatever. So we actually went. We didn't do any protesting because my husband at the time only agreed to let us go if we would not take part in any actions because he didn't want to have to worry about bailing us out of jail or anything like that. So we just we helped out around my tribe's camp. Each of the 7 council fires, which is like seven different affiliated tribes, so like the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, each one of us had our own camp within the camp. And so what we did is we helped out with a lot of like kitchen duties and things like that. So we basically helped cook all the meals every day for the people that were going out and actually taking part in the actions and the actual protests and whatnot. So that was interesting. And then as far as if my tribe has actually been impacted, not by that particular pipeline, but I believe it was the Keystone pipeline or one of the other major ones, that there was a leak close to my reservation a couple of years ago. If you Google it, you'll probably, if you Google my tribal name, you'll probably come up with some news articles that talk about that a little bit. Thankfully, I don't think it impacted the drinking water or anything like that, but there were definitely some concerns at the time that it happened, for obvious reasons.
Right. Yeah. See, I didn't even know there were people doing that at Standing Rock. So already learning something.
Oh yeah, there was a ton of people. Lots of celebrities got involved. I think when I was there.
Well, I knew that, but I meant like the kitchen stuff that you were doing.
Oh
Like I
yeah, yeah.
didn't know that there were people doing that. So,
Oh yeah, there was. It was actually really cool because, like I said, my son at the time, he was probably 10 or 11, I think. And there were lots of kids at camp as well. And so they actually had teachers. And so they had school during the day as well. And so he actually got to do school while he was there. And in fact, a couple of the teachers that were there, they're part of a group called World Story Exchange. And it's a husband and wife team that basically go to various places around the world, and they go and they teach children. And they do it through media as well. And so it was really cool because my son Colin, they actually helped him make his own documentary that kind of explained his time there and talked about the different things that they did around camp to kind of be environmentally friendly, and just kind of talk about what it was all about and why we were there and all that good stuff. So that was actually really cool too. So I've got a link to that as well if you want to view that
okay,
or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Let's see. So I know some of the other people that I've talked to, I've had some Lakota people, I've had, some other people in Georgia and stuff. And they were talking to me about how it's difficult because people want to leave the reservation to get jobs, but then they feel like if they leave the reservation, they lose their heritage. So
Yeah.
didn't know how you felt about that.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly kind of what happened with my family, but it's kind of interesting because so my family converted to Christianity in the late 1800s. And so when they did that, they abandoned their last name and they took a Christian last name. And in doing so, they actually abandoned a lot of the culture as well. So the language, traditions, things of that nature, and kind of adopted like Christian ways. So, even a lot of my family that's on the reservation, because of that, they've lost a lot of that heritage. And so it's just now like with my mom's generation and my generation, we're just now getting back to trying to learn the language, the customs, the traditions, the food, all that good stuff. But for my mom in particular, my mom was the second to youngest of 17 children,
Wow.
all single births, all full siblings, same parents, whole 9 yards. And so both her mom and dad had passed away by the time she was 12. So her dad passed away when she was 7, her mom passed away when she was 12, and then my uncle ended up taking guardianship of her. So she was still living on the reservation at the time that my grandma died, but then she moved to Texas where my uncle was stationed in the military, where he became guardian of her. And she definitely, lost a lot of whatever traditions, language, etc., that was even left because she left the reservation when she was so young.
Right.
I do know that a lot of my family that still lives on the reservation, there's not a whole lot of job opportunities. So a lot of them either work for the casinos or they work for the tribe. And then if they don't have one of those two jobs, I do have some family members that they sell beadwork, artwork, baked goods, things of that nature to try to make ends meet. But it's really interesting and kind of sad just to see how difficult it is for people to survive on the reservation. I mean, our reservation compared to a lot of other ones is not that bad off in terms of like poverty and being really poor and having a lot of like the drug and alcohol problems that a lot of the other tribes do. I mean, we still have that, but not necessarily to the extent of some of the other ones. Like, for instance, my uncle was married to a Pueblo woman and he passed away in 2008. And I flew down there for the funeral, and it was on the Pueblo reservation. And I was completely shocked driving around the reservation because there were so many families that were literally living in tin shacks with no electricity and no water. We don't have that problem so much with my reservation, thankfully. I mean, I don't think they'd be able to survive given the crazy winters that they have.
Right.
There's no way that they could. But yeah, that particular tribe, they are just ridiculously poor, and it's just a really sad situation.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, definitely, yeah, because like you said, like how it is. Now, one thing we were thinking is some people have said like one thing that would be good would be to bring jobs either to the reservation or near the reservation.
Mhm.
So my background and my group, we're all in an environmental school. So that's our big thing. Well, one of the things is a lot of reservations out west, there's a lot of sun. So one thing we were thinking is like, what if we brought solar farms near the reservation? Not exactly on tribal land, but within driving or walking distance. And then a tribe could be in charge of maintaining that. It would do job teaching and things like that. I didn't know how you felt about things like that, and whether
Oh,
those would be good things or.
I am all for getting creative as far as that kind of stuff goes. So I would definitely be supportive of that. I know one thing that our tribe has been talking about, and other tribes as well, is getting into medical marijuana, which I
Hmm.
think would actually be a pretty, it would probably work out pretty well for them. I mean, if you look at Colorado and how well they're doing with all the taxes and
Yeah.
everything associated with that. So yeah, I'm all for getting creative and doing whatever we can to get people working because they want to work. They don't want to be in the cycle of poverty and dysfunction and all that stuff, but it's just so hard when there's no opportunities there, and that's really all you know.
Right. Definitely. Um, so how do you, okay, so are there any, like, do you think there are any people or events in your culture or in history in general that you think everyone should know about?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many different Indian wars and things like that that went on that like a lot of people don't know anything about. The one that I'm thinking about in particular that my mom feels very passionately about and talks about a lot is I'm probably going to butcher this. I think it's the Dakota 38, and that's basically where that many people were executed um, unjustly. If you Google it, it'll tell you like the whole backstory of that. And I think Abraham Lincoln was president at the time and basically sanctioned it. And it was just, the whole situation was just really sad. And then, obviously the Trail of Tears, everybody knows about that because they talk about that in history class. I'm trying to think of some other things. Battle of Little Bighorn, where General Custer was killed. Um, and then I think a lot of people they're not aware of a lot of the issues that we faced in Indian country. We had up until the late 70s, I think it was 1 in 4, if I remember correctly, 1 in 4 Native American women were getting sterilized against their will in hospitals, which is just ridiculous. And I mean, a lot of people of color that was happening to at the
Right.
same time, but it was happening in record numbers with our women. And then of course, we weren't even officially citizens of the United States until right around 100 years ago, I believe. Didn't have the right to vote, I think, until after that. It's just kind of crazy because I feel like even though we're the original inhabitants of this land, like we've really been treated like second-class citizens. And
Right.
I know the government tries to make up a lot of that with like, the casinos and money and extra funding and healthcare and things of that nature, but it's not enough. And then, the other big thing now that I'm thinking about it as well is all of the abuse that went on in the residential schools. A lot of people don't know about that.
Yeah, I was reading into
Um,
some of that. Yeah.
yeah, it's really sad because it's caused, in my opinion, I believe it's caused an extensive amount of generational trauma with our people. They were ripped away from their families at young ages. They were forced to cut off all their hair, which in our culture, our hair is our strength, and we don't cut our hair unless we're in mourning. So, you take away that strength, you take away the language. They were beating the children when they were catching them speaking their language or practicing their traditions. And then, of course, a lot of these residential schools were ran by Catholics. And, there's
Right.
a lot of, I mean, I hate to just like group all Catholics in the same group because I know they're not all that way, but, obviously the sexual abuse and whatnot in the Catholic Church has been rampant for hundreds of years. And so there was a lot of sexual abuse that went on as well. And then I think, what happened is these kids came back to the reservation, and, not everybody who is sexually abused goes on to molest other people, but some people do. And so there's a lot of sexual abuse that runs rampant in the families back on the reservations as well. And I truly believe that that wouldn't have happened or wouldn't be happening still had they not been forced to go to the residential schools. And I
Right.
think they were sending the kids away to residential schools like up until the 60s or 70s, I think. So it really wasn't that long ago, where kids were being ripped away from their families. So it's really kind of sad. So that stuff really bothers me because I read, all of the stories, and it breaks my heart just to see all the trauma that that our people had to go through unnecessarily, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. But then also another thing that I've read is that a lot of when now that they're, able to go to school on the reservations again, that a lot of those unfortunately are very underfunded.
Yeah. Yep, you have that problem as well. And then I know, one thing I will say is, so I have a unique perspective in that I'm biracial. So, I mentioned my mom is full-blooded Sioux Indian, and my dad is very white, like blonde hair, blue eye kind of deal. So, I not only experience racism, discrimination, etc., because I'm brown and I'm different than people, but I also have the white privilege piece of it too, because I feel like had I been living on the reservation, I wouldn't have a lot of the opportunities that I've had in my life, and I wouldn't be where I am today had I been there. When I'm working, I'm actually a very successful business professional. I've been in management for the last 10 plus years. I make a decent living, a decent wage, definitely much more than what any of my relatives on the reservation make. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So there was a point to this. I'm rambling now. Um, what was your question again?
It was just the it was cultural stuff, and then like what are the big issues you think that are affecting um tribes of Native Americans today? And you talked a little bit about the sexual abuse and the stuff through schools and
Yeah.
poverty in certain ones and lack of jobs and
Well, I mean, another issue that we had is that we weren't allowed to practice our religion or spirituality beliefs up until like the late 70s. It was criminalized, and that's why a lot of people like Sitting Bull, chiefs like that were persecuted, and because they still continued to practice the sacred rituals and dances and things of that nature. It was just really sad because this country was founded on freedom of religion, but yet we wouldn't let Native Americans practice their religion.
because they weren't citizen. Yeah.
It wasn't Christianity, and it was different than what everybody was used to. And maybe even people would call it barbaric because they do Sundance and whatnot, and that's a pretty intense experience,
Hmm.
and extremely painful. So so I get it to a certain extent, but I'm one of those people where I firmly believe, like, if your beliefs are not hurting anyone else, or what you're doing is not hurting anyone else, then it shouldn't be your concern.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you talked a little bit about Sundance and stuff. So I've also talked to some people that are like big into the powwow group but have no Indigenous blood. So I didn't know how you personally felt about things like that, like when people try and people respect things and try and be part of it, or like, you know, have dream catchers, or you know what I mean? How I didn't know how you felt about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a very fine line between appreciating a culture and culture appropriation. That's what I'm trying to say. So I have very mixed feelings about it. I mean, honestly, I am not a big fan of headdresses on non-native people because, you know, basically war bonnets, each feather in a war bonnet represents something good that was done in battle. So it would be like the equivalent of, you know, someone receiving a medal that was in the Army or Navy or whatever,
Right.
and people wouldn't go around wearing medals that they didn't earn. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like we don't get that same respect, and we deserve that same respect, in my humble opinion. Dream catchers, I'm not, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I mean, I feel like if you're a white person and you're gifted that from somebody that's Native American, that's cool. They wanted you to have that as a gift. You do with it what you want, kind of deal.
Hmm.
But like the dream catchers that are like made in China and things like that, like I'm
Yeah.
very offended by
Yeah.
that, because that's not a legit dream catcher. And you know, there's a lot of things that go into the making of regalia and arts and crafts. I mean, like for instance, like jingle dresses. A lot of women wear those in powwows, and those are the ones where when they dance, they make noise. So on the jingle dresses, the little silver things that hang down off of those are actually the lids of like tobacco cans.
Huh.
And jingle dresses actually take an entire year to make, because you can only put on one jingle at a time on the dress. And as you do it, you have to be in a positive mindset and a good way. You have to pray as you're doing it. Um, and really a lot of like, you just have to be in a good frame of mind when you're
Right.
doing things like that.
Yeah,
And
see,
when,
I didn't know that stuff took, you know, that much care and stuff.
yeah,
So,
it's really cool when you start looking into some of that stuff, just learning about the process and figuring out like how much work really goes into that sort of thing. And so just to kind of see like dream catchers, like you said, mass produced in China, it's super
yeah.
offensive.
But
Um,
sometimes that's how people like on reservations, you know, pay for is selling the things that they've made, you know what I
yep,
mean? So,
yep,
but yeah, definitely the made in China, the what those ones definitely no.
yeah. So I guess that my answer is, I guess it really just depends on what it is.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you bought it or if it was gifted to you, you know, that sort of thing.
Definitely. So I know that in the earlier years, like especially before the 60s, Native Americans were never portrayed well in film or movies or TV shows or whatever.
Yeah,
And I know that there are tons of bad examples out there. But I
lots of
didn't
John
know.
Wayne movies.
Right, right, right. Well, I didn't know if you had seen any good or bad representation anywhere that you know, felt like you had an example of.
Like in film in particular.
Film, movie, just media.
Um, I mean, I like a lot of the more recent movies that have been made within, say, the last 20, 30 years, because I do feel like a lot of filmmakers have done their best to, A, recruit actual Native American actors and actresses to play these parts, which makes it more authentic, obviously. And I really feel like they've done a lot more as far as like research and things like that to make the portrayals as accurate as possible. So I definitely think Hollywood has done a much better job in recent years. As far as like film examples, I'm trying to think. There was the one a few years ago that really touched me when I watched it. And I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it was called Savages, and it had Christian Bale in it. I thought that was a really good movie. A lot of like the HBO like miniseries and things like that. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
one was called Into the West. I think a lot of them have done really good portrayals. And it's definitely a lot better and more respectful in, the last 20 to 30 years than say what it was, 50 plus years ago.
Yeah, I think that also just comes with changing generations, and like, oh, maybe we should actually, look into this more before we just do it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So let's see. So we talked a little bit about the school system there, and I don't know if you have any thoughts about like how in just and regular schools, public schools and stuff in general, how you think maybe the curriculum should change a little bit. You know what I mean? Like obviously when you're a kid, we learned, all the Indians and the settlers, because they use Indians in that term, unfortunately, when we're learning. But the Native Americans and the settlers sat down and had turkey and it was a good time. You know what I mean? So I didn't know if you thought that there was a age or, something like that that we think maybe we should be like, okay, this is what happened and it was terrible.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because that actually just reminded me of what I was going to talk to you about when we were talking about schools on the reservations and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, but
No,
might be
that's
relevant
fine.
to what you're looking for. So, one thing that is very interesting, and that I wasn't aware of until I started visiting the reservation, because now we back the train up a little bit. So my mom and dad divorced when I was like 6 or 7. And my dad, who is my white parent, actually got custody of me. And
Mm-hmm.
so my mom was just a very part-time parent up until I was probably 16 years old. And so that disconnect caused a lot of issues for me in my childhood. So like when I was in elementary school, I dealt with a lot of bullying and name calling. I was physically assaulted on a regular basis. I went through some really, really horrible things, and it caused me for a long time, up until probably my late teenage years, where I kind of had a little bit of an identity crisis. When I was little, I wished nothing more than to have blonde hair and blue eyes and white skin, so I wasn't singled out and I didn't have to deal with the bullying issues and things like that. Um, so I guess the point I'm trying to get to is, since my mom wasn't a huge part of my life, and my dad was very conservative Christian,
Right.
we were allowed to be proud of our heritage, but we weren't allowed to bring any dream catchers or anything like that into the house because they were of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's literally like what I had to deal with growing up with my white father. Um, but anyway, I didn't visit the reservation for the first time until I was about probably 21, I think. I think my mom had taken us back there when we were really little, but I don't remember the visit.
Right.
So that's the first visit that I remember. And what was really striking to me is the amount of racism that people experience as Native Americans on the reservations. And I have experienced it both on my own reservation, as well as when I went out to the Pueblo reservation for my uncle's funeral. I dealt with some issues there as well. So we deal with that a lot on the reservations, and it's not like how it is here in Ohio. I feel like in Ohio we have a lot of racist people, but I feel like they're closeted racist, so you don't necessarily know that they are. In
Unfortunately,
South,
until recently, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then in South Dakota, they are loud and proud about it. They don't care. My son and I, when we went back to Standing Rock, we actually, one of the hotels that we stopped at in North Dakota, we went in, we went in to get dinner, and we were just blatantly ignored, and they wouldn't seat us. They actually sat a couple white families before they ever sat us, and we were actually at the hostess table and whatnot. And then when we finally got seated, I was obviously a little aggravated, and the table next to me started, like I had on a Buckeyes shirt because I'm from Ohio, and
Right.
love the Buckeyes. And this guy at the table next to us just starts talking a bunch of smack about the Buckeyes and just saying other things that, like, I could tell that he was talking about me and my son, but like wouldn't address me. It's just it's really sad. Like, I feel like if I'm gonna go back and visit my reservation, that's stuff that I shouldn't have to deal with. But that's
Right.
stuff that my relatives deal with on a daily basis. Just going to Walmart and getting harassed by people. It's really sad.
So do people
What we
come
deal
on
with.
to the reservation and harass them, or it's just when they leave the reservation?
Well, see, it's interesting because a lot of people think that non-Native Americans can't live on reservations, and that's not true. So, like with my reservation, it's literally hundreds of square miles, and so there are also a lot of white people that live on the reservation as well. So they experience it when they go out into the public on their own reservation. So
Yeah, that's terrible.
yeah, you wouldn't think that that happens, but it definitely happens. I liken it to how some people are with, say, Hispanics here in
Hmm.
Ohio. Basically, Native Americans out there are white people's Hispanics. That's basically, they're treated like second class citizens. It's really unfortunate.
So why are there Caucasian people living on the reservation then, if they don't like the people that they're surrounded by?
That's a really good question. And I don't know the answer to that other than it's probably just cheaper to live there. You know what I mean? The population is not, um, I want to say that Columbus actually has a larger population, or pretty close to the same population as the whole state of South Dakota.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty sparse. Yeah. It's a lot of
Yeah.
just farmland. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's probably just the cost of living is what I'm guessing. And there's a lot of farmers out there and whatnot. Like my mom still has some of her family's land. And so she actually leases her land to farmers, and she gets, checks every year or whatever
For
for
doing
them being
nothing.
able to,
Yeah.
yeah, for them being able to use her land. She's like, I'm not using it anyway, and they're farming, so that's fine.
Right. Um, and then, so is there anything that you wish for, like, just regular college students, regular people in general to, like, know, like, hey, this is a problem, or, this is happening that most people wouldn't even know, you know?
Yeah, so I do use my personal Facebook page a lot to raise awareness about our issues because, a lot of my friends, they've never had a Native American friend before. And when they become friends with me, they read a lot of my posts and their minds are just blown because they're like, we had no idea that any of this stuff was still going on. So, I mean, I am not a big fan of are people being used as mascots. I am staunchly against it. There's so much research and statistics behind that, which show how psychologically damaging it is to especially younger Native American children. And the school that I went to high school with here in Central Ohio, their mascot was actually an Indian. And so going there as a Native American and then, having them do like the tomahawk chop is just super offensive and hurtful.
Yeah, there's so
Um,
many animals to choose from. Just choose an
yeah,
animal.
exactly. And people are just, a lot of white people don't understand it because they're like, you should just get over it. It's honoring you. And it's like, no, you're not, because you don't understand, the trauma that our youth deal with because of this. And like, I think back on my reservation, there actually is a high school. There was a controversy a couple years ago where uh, the high school was predominantly white, but there was also Native American students there, obviously, since it was on the reservation. But their mascot is a Native American, and they actually apparently every year have this thing that they do around homecoming, where everyone on the homecoming court dresses up as Native Americans as part of like some little ritual that they've established. And it's super offensive. It's not even like actual regalia. It's like these flimsy, cheap
Halloween
costumes.
outfits, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's super offensive as well, because, you know, like I was telling you with, like, I'll go back to the jingle dress example. Like, there's a lot of time and effort and love and positive energy and emotions that go into the making of regalia, and for people to just, you know, buy these cheap knockoffs and wear it and think that they're honoring us is just, it's offensive.
Yeah.
And they don't know why. And that's why I try to use my Facebook page to educate a lot of people. And I actually do a lot of public posts as well, because I do have a lot of followers on my page. So that way, you know, publicly people can see that as well.
Right, and people can share it and help people be more aware, for
Exactly.
sure. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, like that, yeah. To me, that's upsetting, you know. And like I always like right now in the news with the Cleveland Indians, you know, changing their name and everybody getting mad about that. And I'm like, well, obviously you had a red-faced mascot, which was very racist and not okay. It's
It's
not
just
even
as
like
bad
the
as blackface.
Warriors or something, you know, like yes, just blatant disregard.
Yeah. But to answer your question, because you did ask a question about like as far as when we should educate kids, um, I struggle with that because I feel like a lot of the history is very brutal,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't necessarily want small children to know about that, but at the same time you don't want to whitewash things either, because I think that's been going on for way too long. As far as an appropriate age, I mean, I feel like mid-elementary school, I think kids are old enough to get a very PG, I guess,
Right, like
version
we
of the
did things
history.
to them that was not okay. Like we
Yeah,
killed them, whatever, but not
yeah,
go into detail. Like, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yep.
definitely. Yeah, it's like one thing, like, so I've been out of high school for 10 years now, but like I remember when I was going, like we never really learned anything. And like when I was a kid, I adored Pocahontas, like just the freedom, the spirit, you know, all of that. So I ended up doing a lot of research on my own. And then when like they would be like, oh, we're going to talk about, you know, settling out west. And I was like, oh, cool. And then it was just like, there was the Trail of Tears and we marched out the Indians and we made them die. You know what I mean? And then you stop there and you go, and this famous explorer and this famous explorer. And it's like, what about what happened? What about what about all them? You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot of history and a lot of stories, and there's so many tribes too, and all the tribes have their own little stories as well. So it's hard to kind of fit all that into a curriculum. I mean, to be honest with you, I really feel like it could be its own high school class or college class.
Right. Definitely a
Um,
college course, yeah, for
yeah,
sure. And there are some colleges that have that. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to get it, even if it's just like teachers that have, here's this optional extra credit assignment for you to learn more, you know, and broaden your horizons, even if there's not time for it in the curriculum. You know what I mean? Because then that could teach people more.
yeah.
And I guess another thing is all the um, sacred sites and stuff. I guess recently, a lot of like senators and stuff have been not wanting to acknowledge sacred and religious sites because they weren't original sites because we, you know, moved all the Native Americans out there. So I didn't know your thoughts on that. Like, you
Oh,
know,
I absolutely think the Black Hills should be given back to the tribes. I mean, that is a very, very sacred place to our people. I mean, our people went there for vision quests and things of that nature. That would be just like, you know, someone going and desecrating, uh, you know, a huge Catholic church. I mean, just because it's not the same as Christianity doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of the same thoughts, feelings, emotions towards these places of worship, because that's basically what they are.
right.
It's just out in nature. So I think people just don't get it. And
And
then, you
they
know,
just see it as land. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They took the Black Hills because they found gold in it. That's the only reason why the government took it, is because they wanted to mine that and be able to make money off of it. And we don't care about anything like that. We are true stewards of the land, and we try to make sure that, we leave the earth as best we can in the way that it was when we were born. You know what I mean? Like, we want to make sure that it's just as good, if not better, for the next generation.
Right. Yeah. Which I think we as humans are starting to go back into that, but it just for so many, but it's very slow going, with
Yeah.
sustainability and everything. It's more, does it make money? Cool, do it.
Yep.
Which is a terrible way to live. Um,
I
so
agree.
so I think that that's all I have. Thank you so much. Like I said, I just wanted to get, some perspective from people of
Yeah.
the culture.
Well, I was going to say too, if you need anybody else to talk to, I mean, I've got a few other people that you could talk to that would probably be an even better resource than me, just because, like I said, my perspective is very limited
Right.
because of everything I told you. But like, I have a cousin of mine who, it's actually my uncle that was married to the Pueblo woman that I was telling you about. It's his
Yeah.
son. So he is half Sistian Oyate and half Pueblo, and he's also a medicine man.
Mm-hmm.
So he builds teepees, sweat lodges. He knows our language, knows a lot
Yeah.
of the
Cool.
customs. Like, he is a lot more immersed in that than what I've ever been. So he would be a good person to talk to. And then another person that I'm thinking of is one of the people that I met back at Standing Rock. Her name is Trish Zapata. And she's actually the great granddaughter of the Mexican Zapata that you hear about in I think the Mexican wars or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So she would have a unique perspective in that she's from one of the southwestern tribes, or I think maybe her family's even from Mexico, because I think a lot of people don't realize that Mexicans are actually indigenous as well.
Exactly. Yep.
So
Yeah,
if you
if
need
you want to
anybody else,
let them
let me
know I'm
know. And
doing this, that'd be great. And if they want to talk to me, great.
okay.
I hope I didn't offend you in any of the questions I ask
Oh,
or anything like that. Just trying to learn and get perspective.
no, I mean, I'm one of those people where I don't get offended at all, because I would much rather people ask me questions and educate themselves in that manner versus just assuming or going by what the internet tells them. I have a lot more respect for people that will just come out and ask me questions versus just assuming. I mean, I think that as humans, we need to get better about that as far as our differences go. And I know that we do have a lot of people in the various, how do I want to put this? There are some people in the BIPOC communities that are very angry and don't feel it's their job to educate people. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not one of those people, because I feel like we need to not be angry about some issues, because I feel like education is key. Compassion is key. Empathy is key. Understanding is key. Like, we're never going to be able to get to understand each other and accept each other and love each other without being able to communicate and being open and honest and asking tough questions, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But that's
So,
just me.
no, yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Like I said, if you want to let them know I'm doing this, then either I can send you information to give them, or you send me that. That would be great. I'm working on this through the end of the month. So,
Okay. Okay.
but
I will definitely reach out to them. I might even just do a Facebook post or something, because I have a lot of Native American friends and from different tribes. And so I think it'd be really cool for you to get perspective from multiple
yeah,
tribes
from multiple tribes and
and
different,
multiple
yeah,
people,
for
because
sure.
all of our experiences are individual and they're all going to be different.
Exactly. So, and
So,
I mean, that's the same in any culture you're part of, everybody has a different way that they've lived and done things. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a good day.
thank you. You too.
Bye.
All right. Bye.